Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? I'm back. I'm healthy. Kind of.
Better than you were last week.
Yeah, I went for a run today. I tweeted
there
out
you
that
go.
I felt my lungs burning. I just felt like somebody ripped them out and put them back in. Don't know if that's supposed to happen.
I would say no.
And then you look it up online because you're like, hey, by the way, my name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. I look it up online because I'm like, how long after I get COVID should I start running again?
Right.
And then, I don't get anything. I get these articles about long COVID and how a marathon runner is paralyzed from the neck down because of COVID. Kind of horrible.
Oh.
And I'm like, I feel like
It's really horrible.
I feel like I didn't get that kind of COVID, if we had to take a guess. But either way, my lungs did burn. But I'm back. I'm healthy, kind of, and I'm ready to talk about fantasy football. I was back last week, but I really wasn't mentally all there. So I'm sorry. I probably still dominated Rick in the mock draft, but
Oh, okay. I think you did, actually, if I remember correctly. You made one pick that made me gag, but other than that,
it's okay.
You did good.
But anyway, so welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. I feel like June, and this is not our first show in June, but it's the first time I'm going to say this. I feel like June is really the big kickoff to off-season like content for fantasy football.
Right.
We spend a lot of April, like going back January and February are like analysis and off-season activities. Analysis from our previous season, and then off-season activities like, free agency.
This is really looking ahead to the season, I feel like.
Yeah, and so now jumping into June, July, and August, this is where the meat and potatoes of drafting and of planning your redraft drafts out and your teams out are really going to start coming together, and we're going to talk a lot about a lot of different stuff. But, and we did much draft quarterbacks last week. Rick did those.
Yeah.
Derek Carr.
Hey, come on.
I'm not judging, but I'm judging a little.
He's got Devontae Adams.
But I like to call this month. We're going to do rankings towards the end of the month, but I like to call this month Sleeper Month because we are going, not because of the app that we use to play fantasy football, but we're going to talk about sleepers at the running back, wide receiver, and tight end position and the quarterback position over the next 4 weeks or 3 weeks, and give you some constructive ideas on later round players that you can kind of target in your drafts that might have the potential of providing, at least somewhat of a decent upside in fantasy football. So we're going to talk about sleepers. We'll talk about more about what that means in a second. But before we do, check our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the social media platforms. Website's back up, so I've been saying it for weeks that you should go to our website that doesn't function, but now it's back up, so you can go there. If you're listening on a podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platforms, please leave a review, share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions that you have for us and your favorite sleeper running back for this season. Want to hear it. Want to hear what you guys think of the late potential running backs in the draft. But anyway, a lot of talk.
Yeah, you should take Marlon Mack in the 5th round.
In the 5th round of your redraft leagues.
He's a real sleeper.
I did a startup and I drafted him 101.
You know who always comes through is Myles Gaskin. You can get him at 194.
He's either Myles Gas Can, like he brings the gas, or Myles Trash Can.
Which is 95% of the time.
95% of the time, Myles Trash Can. So let's talk about the top 5 sleeper running backs. To preface this, Rick, what the crap's a sleeper?
A sleeper? Oh man, I should get the Urban Dictionary definition. Yeah.
You want the
Basically.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you want the thug definition or?
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. A sleeper is somebody that you're not going to get early. Someone who a lot of people are, well, quote unquote, sleeping on. So players that are going later than they should be.
Yes, and guys that I think to add on to what Rick was saying too, I feel like people look at shows like these and think, oh, these guys are going to be potential breakouts.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen.
These guys could suck.
These guys could suck.
Especially running back.
Especially a running back.
If we did quarterback and wide receivers and tight end sleepers, I think of the 4 positions, running backs probably have the best odds to suck. Maybe tight ends too, but I don't know. Running backs are definitely not. This is why we tell you to draft them early.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. Even some of the guys we have on this list.
Trying to plan this show was a cluster.
Yeah, a lot of the guys on this list are still like 6th round picks.
Yeah,
and
some of them could and when I say the chances, when I say that we don't expect them to have breakout years where they blow up, that doesn't mean they can't have a season like that. Sure. But I would say the chances of it happening are very low. I kind of anticipate these guys more being, flex-worthy players that you can start on a week-to-week basis and get production out of.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt what you were saying, Rick. Continue.
No, I'm. That's pretty much what I was going to say too. There are some guys later, but those guys are going to be mostly handcuffs. And it's kind of a wasteland. Sure, one of those guys could hit, and you're going to be like, "Oh, why didn't you call J.D. McKissick a sleeper?" And it's like, okay, we missed that one. But chances are, a lot of these guys late are not going to hit. So we took guys that I think are the best chance of what you said, being flex guys that you can start on a week-to-week basis that have the upside that maybe they could break out, but that's not why they're on our list.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. So we're going to give you sleeper running backs today now that we have that preface out the way. And we're going to talk about sleeper wide receivers next week, and then tight ends and quarterbacks as well. Maybe 3 tight ends and 3 quarterbacks. No, maybe 5 quarterbacks. 5 quarterbacks could be fine. Sleeper quarterbacks are different because those are guys that you can get late that we actually might think could be breakout guys. So, anyway.
Right.
But today we're going to talk about running backs more specifically, and we'll try to keep this short, concise. Rick had a nice 25-minute show last week by himself, so we'll try to hold to that.
I'll say it's easier to do shorter shows though when you're just talking to yourself.
Yes, and you get kind of like
versus talking to somebody.
When you're doing a show by yourself, man, it's hard to keep the energy.
Yeah. That's fair.
But anyway, so let's talk about the first guy that we do have on our top 5 sleeper list. And so we have a couple of guys that we like. They're kind of all in the same vicinity, except for one guy that is kind of a little bit more of a stretch play, I guess. But the first guy that we're going to go with is A.J. Dillon. Rick brought up these fantastic stats about how Dillon last year, and I didn't even know this, but Dillon finished a lot higher than I thought he did last year. He's the RB23 season. And I was like, wait a minute. When did that happen? And I realized that I don't ever have any Packers players. So I don't watch. But last year he had 187 rushing attempts, 803 yards, 34 receptions, which is...
That's the thing that surprised me too.
That was one of the most surprising aspects of his game, and he had 313 receiving yards. So, obviously you had. And how many games did you say Aaron Jones missed?
He missed 2 games.
So he only missed 2 games, and you still had Dillon have 34 receptions. So unless 20 of those receptions came in the 2 games he missed, then he was doing he was pass catching when Aaron Jones was still starting and on the team. the big thing that, puts A.J. Dillon in the front of the conversation is that not only did he have this year last year, but based on what we're hearing from reports, it sounds like A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are going to be a 50-50 split.
Yep.
And I'll let Rick go through some of the good things statistically about A.J. Dillon. But I will say, Dillon to me is a much better value at pick 71 in drafts than drafting Aaron Jones at pick 25. Because if they're going to be basically used the same between pass catching and rushing, then I will take the guy that is 50 picks later than the guy who I'm going to have to use most likely a top 3 round selection to get.
Right.
So I actually kind of, I'm going to rank Aaron Jones higher,
right,
just based on pure
passing, I think.
Yeah, and the fact that he is their running back, when the crap hits the fan, when they get into the red zone,
yeah,
they're going to give the ball to Aaron Jones. But AJ Dillon did a lot last year that was productive, and I love him going into this season. But I think he can provide you a base flex floor or an RB2, floor that would basically produce enough fantasy points for you to justify starting him on a week-to-week basis and win your fantasy matchups because of it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Aaron Jones obviously should be ranked higher. He did have 65 targets last year in 15 games, and 52 catches. So he's going to be heavily involved in the passing game, especially with Devontae Adams out. I think I could be wrong, but I thought I saw a report where I heard that Aaron Jones was lined up in the slot too for some plays in minicamp. So that's something to keep an eye on. That he's really going to be heavily involved in the passing game. But that leaves the rushing to A.J. Dillon, who kind of emerged last year in the second half of the season as kind of the starter running back. He had a lot of carries. I mean, he finished the year with more carries than Aaron Jones. He did miss those 2 games, but he had 187 carries to Aaron Jones's 171. So even if you give Aaron Jones those 2 games, it would probably be about even, or at least very close. And A.J. Dillon had 34 catches, which we brought up earlier, which surprised both of us. I thought he wasn't really involved in the passing game like that, but apparently he is. He also had 2 received touchdowns. Aaron Jones had more touchdowns. He had 10 total on the season, I believe. He had 10 total on the season to A.J. Dillon's 7, I believe. So I think A.J. Dillon could get more this year. I could see that happening. I know Aaron Jones is their guy, especially in the red zone. But A.J. Dillon, the way he's built as a player, he's probably the closest running back to Derrick Henry that we have in the league who's not Derrick Henry. Obviously, nobody is Derrick Henry, but just the way he's built, that huge physical running back. So he's kind of built for the red zone. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if A.J. Dillon gets more than 7 touchdowns this year. But based on where he's going, which is, I believe, 6th round, and 70th overall, something like that. He's one of the later guys that we're going to talk about. That's pretty good value. I mean, he's going behind guys like Kenneth Walker. He's in the same area as Kareem Hunt. So to me, I'm taking A.J. Dillon way over those guys. And he's got that sort of ceiling as well. His not as much, because as long as Aaron Jones is there, he's not going to be like top 5 running back. But he was productive last year as the RB23. And it looks like there's a chance that it could go up for him. So I think it's very good value.
Yeah, I agree. And then the other thing I was going to say too is, did you mention his fantasy points per opportunity?
I did not.
So last year he had, and 0.83 is not a great number.
No.
Like, it's not fantastic. I would say it's mediocre. I kind of like that to be at a 1, but this is why I don't think A.J. Dillon is going to be a breakout running back. Like, if I was looking for a breakout guy, I would be looking for a guy with a 1 fantasy point per opportunity. When I see A.J. Dillon and his 0.83, I know he's going to produce enough. He's going to have 200 215 to 225 opportunities. And if you put those numbers, you punch them in the calculator, 225 opportunities times 0.83, he finishes anywhere between 190 and 200 fantasy points, which to me is a really good secondary running back or flex option for your team. Especially when you're talking about unless you draft two big running backs early, it's going to be hard to find a secondary running back. Rick had we did a mock draft last week, and Rick did, two wide receivers to start. And you did that, right? I'm not just making it up.
Yes.
Okay. But zero wide receiver is becoming, or zero running back strategies are becoming more and more difficult because you can't find running backs that are consistent. But I kind of look at A.J. Dillon similar to how I looked at, Damian Harris last year, where, he probably is not going to be an elite, top 10, 8, 7, 6 running back, but he'll probably produce mid-range RB2, maybe late RB2 numbers that are enough to keep you afloat at your second running back spot. And sometimes especially if you have enough talent at wide receiver, that might be enough to get you across the finish line. So I like the 0.83 for A.J. Dillon. And I definitely think this guy's a sleeper. Like people are looking at him and going, "Oh, Aaron Jones is the starting running back."
Right.
And it's like,
and that's not really the case.
But they'll split.
They will split. Yeah. I mean, that was a latest report. I believe it came from, I don't know his name. He's from The Athletic. Said that he expects a 50-50 split. He's a Packers beat guy. So, I that's what I expect too. I mean, A.J. Dillon's also in his third year. I think the way the Packers offense is built as well, they're going to try to run the ball more. So I wouldn't be surprised at all.
All right. Ready to move on to the next guy?
Yeah.
All right. Second, James Cook, running back, Buffalo Bills, only rookie on this list, but he is a little bit later in drafts. He's going at pick 103. And he's an interesting guy because obviously we know we have Devin Singletary in Buffalo. And if you look for Devin Singletary, and he actually might not be a bad sleeper either, to be honest with you. But if you look at the end of the season last year with Singletary, he started to come on. Like he wasn't like everyone was talking about how the Bills don't have a running back. They kind of suck at the running back position. Even going into this year's draft, everyone was like, they need to draft Walker. They need to draft Breece Hall, somebody really, really good so they can get a real running back. But this team seems to like Devin Singletary a little bit because they keep running with him. And he had a good playoffs. So, they bring in James Cook, and I think there's one aspect to the Bills that they don't really utilize, and I think it's just because they don't have a running back that's good in this position, and it's pass catching at the running back position. And I think this is the main reason why they brought in James Cook. I mean, Rick was talking about, pre-draft when we were breaking down running backs, his flyer was, what was it? James Cook was his number 4 guy. Is that right? Or 3?
He was my number 4 guy.
So, but he wanted to throw James Cook in there in his top 5 as a flyer because it was like this guy could be good in PPR and half PPR formats because he might be a pass-catching running back, similar to what James White did with the Patriots for all those years. And I think the Bills brought this guy in to be that.
Yes.
Based on what I've heard from just the training camps, rookie camps, the mini camp and the rookie camp that they've done so far, it sounds like James Cook is going to be second on the depth chart to Devin Singletary when it comes to rushing, but that he's going to be out there for pass catching downs, which is a lot because it's all the Bills do. If this kid ends up being a 70, 80, 90 catch player, then you could have a really, really decent RB2 on your team that could be a flex. I don't know if he'll hit that point, but I mean, are we really like, if you like James Cook, you like James Cook, it is what it is. But this team drafted a running back, and do we really worry about Devin Singletary in that backfield?
No.
And so it's like if James Cook comes out and he ends up being really good, and early in the season he rushes really effectively, and he's pass catching well, I don't see a way, I don't see a situation where, James Cook couldn't take over that role and then end up providing decent fantasy output. I don't think he's going to be a breakout. I don't think that's how the Buffalo Bills run their offense. I don't think they're going to have a running back that's, a top 7, top 8 guy. I just don't know that that's going to happen. But I think that James Cook has the opportunity to ascend into a much more prominent role with the Bills, and I think that's why they brought him in.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you said. I don't think his ceiling is necessarily that high, although, we'll see how it plays out with Singletary. And if Singletary starts to sink again like he did in the beginning of last year, just not produce, James Cook will probably get his opportunity. And then if that happens, watch out. But I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But let's just say Singletary still stays the guy and James Cook kind of just has a third down back role. He should still be decent fantasy in PPR considering how heavy the Bills pass the ball. I mean, they were top 3 in the league last year in pass attempts,
something like that.
Josh Allen had. I don't know if it was top 3, but they were up there. Josh Allen had 655 pass attempts, so or the team had 655 pass attempts, which I believe is in at least the top 10. And we know how many touchdowns the Bills score. Obviously, it's an elite offense. So James Cook should get a lot of passing work opportunity, and if he can just do that to go along with carries, he'll be productive and he'll be a flex option week in and week out. And at the running back position, that's going to be huge. At the 103 where he's going right now in the 10th round, to get a guy who you could start at the running back position on a week-to-week basis if you have to, will be important. And a lot of the guys in this range, again, you're probably not going to get that with. Penny maybe to start the year, but I think we both agree that Kenneth Walker will eventually take that role. Michael Carter, obviously not. Melvin Gordon, maybe at times, but I think I would rather James Cook. James Robinson, if he's healthy, maybe, but he's coming off an Achilles, might miss the beginning of the year. Isaiah Spiller, I would absolutely take James Cook over. Rahamond Stevenson, I would take James Cook over for PPR. At least Ronald Jones, Damian Pierce. So, and even Tony Pollard ahead of him, I think I would take James Cook. So, where he's going right now, I think is a little bit low, all things considering, with that receiving upside.
And it's a good dart throw too. You know what I mean? Yeah. You look at at pick 103. I mean, that's going to be a late 9th in a 12 team, a late 9th, early 10th round pick for a guy that might end up taking over the starting role for the Bills at some point this year. And so I don't know. I think it's worth the flyer, and I think he's a good sleeper play. And there's a chance that he just it doesn't come out in the wash and he ends up sucking. So it could go either way. But anyway, let's move on to the next guy. Number 3, Miles Sanders. I think the ship has sailed with my man Miles Sanders.
I believe it has to.
The RB1 top 10 upside ship has sailed. He kind of, for the last 2 years, I think there's been somewhat of an expectation that Miles Sanders was going to be, a top 10 running back in the NFL, and that he was going to finish in fantasy football in the top 10, top 8 even, that he was the new Christian McCaffrey and all this stuff. And, I fell into that too, but he's just not that. And I think once you look at Miles Sanders and you realize he's not that, but he's still a very good running back in the NFL. He played, how many games did he play last year?
12? He only played 12 games.
He's a good running back. He's a good pass catcher. He can do both of those aspects. He's not going to do it at a top 10 pace, but he's a starting running back in the NFL with, a pass catching role and a rushing role. He could get 50 catches, 200 carries, and be on a football team that, I don't know if Rick disagrees with this, but has a much better offense with A.J. Brown in it. With Devonta Smith. You have a good offensive line. Your quarterback can move the ball down the field decently, and they are predicated on the run. And so they focus a lot on the run as a football team. So Miles Sanders is going to get his opportunities. The question is he going to be more efficient? Because last year he had 0.69 fantasy points per opportunity. In 2020 he had 0.79, and then in 2019 he had 0.9. So he's only gotten worse over the last couple of years. If he can land in like an area of 0.8, I think you could definitely see him fall into the same range that we were talking about A.J. Dillon, which would be a flexible option for you, either at RB2 or flex for the season. Yep. And if you're talking about getting a guy like that in the 6th or 7th round, right now he's going as the... Where the crap is his name? I can't even find it. Oh, he's going in half PPR. He's going off the board at 66. So he's definitely has the the ability to, like, you could get him as your 6th guy and you don't even have to start him, but he does have potential to ascend into the starting role for your team as the season goes along. But what are your thoughts on Miles Sanders, Rick?
Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm counting something.
All right, Miles Sanders, man. He's trying to determine. I have fruit flies.
I'm just counting on where he's going. He is RB 28 right now.
Okay. All right, there we go. I was like, what are you counting? Am I about to get some real stats that I didn't know about? Because I wanted some stats.
I wanted to see where he was coming off the board for running back. So it was
28th. Wow.
Yeah, and that's really good value. So here's the you made some good points comparing him to like what people thought he was. McCaffrey. Obviously, he was one of the guys we got wrong. We had him on a lot of our breakout lists. And the ship has sailed. You're right. You're absolutely right. And it's kind of why I didn't want to put Sanders on this list, but it's kind of too good to pass up because what he did in 2019, and he had a fantastic rookie year, and that's where the expectations came from. He finished as RB 14 in PPR, right?
Yeah.
I still think he's capable of at least doing that. The next year, he was on pace for doing that and got injured. Then this past season was the year that kind of was the anomaly, I think, because he was still getting close to similar work. It obviously went down a little bit, but it was really about his lack of touchdowns. He did not have a single touchdown last season. And I'm not saying Miles Sanders is a guy who's going to get 10, 15 touchdowns because I don't think he is.
Yeah.
But he plays in a good enough offense, at least it should be this year, where he's capable of getting 6 or 7 touchdowns easily.
I think out of all the guys on this list, Sanders, because of the fact that he is the number 1 running back on that team, and they might use him as a workhorse, he has the best shot at ascending into the top 10. But I'm not projecting that.
I'm a little worried about his pass catching because I think Kenneth Gainwell has earned himself a role there.
Right.
But on the ground, he averaged 5.5 yards per carry. That's really good. Obviously, AJ Brown should open things up. I do expect them to throw the ball more, which will hurt Sanders, but it also helped because, again, the better offense. So he should get touchdowns this year. I think that's the biggest thing. And why last year was kind of the anomaly because he's still, of all these guys that we're talking about, I think he's the most secure as being the top guy in their offense. At the running back position. So
no touchdown.
As gross as it is, drafting Miles Sanders at this spot is really not a bad idea.
Yeah, I love it. I will not be surprised if I leave a lot of my redraft drafts with Miles Sanders, depending on the range, because of the value that he provides. You know what I mean? Like Rick was saying, he was what did you say, RB 14 around that range.
His rookie season.
So if he could stay healthy for a full season, I think he's definitely a mid-range RB2, and has a lot of upside there. But let's move on to the next guy, number 4. We talked about him before, Elijah Mitchell. There's some questions that are starting to push him down the board a little bit surrounding, the fact that the 49ers once again used a 4th-round pick on a running back, and that's concerning some people in the fantasy community and outside of that. It's making people more hesitant to draft Elijah Mitchell, and what that has essentially done is pushed him down the board a little bit. But his value right now is becoming a really, really, really good one. And I think that's mainly why he's in this spot. Now, he's a little bit higher, so some people would be like, I don't know about sleeper. I'm like, you go into the late rounds and you tell me who you can pick out as a sleeper, because I can't. But Mitchell is right now pick 61. And so he if you're in a 10-team league, he's definitely in that 6th round, and you can snag him there. 12-team, you're going to have to pay a little bit more to get him, but you're drafting him if you're using some of the strategies that we use, probably as your, flex player.
Right.
So to me, we talked about Elijah Mitchell in the past. If you listen to the show, you know how our thoughts on him. I think he is with Miles Sanders in the conversation of potential to break out and have a really, really big season, possibly. But I think, he's probably going to be in the range of 180 to 190 in that similar AJ Dillon conversation. And my big concern with the San Francisco 49ers is how efficient their offense is with the, new quarterback. Is Trey Lance good? Is he bad? We haven't really seen him play all that much. I don't know. I do like Elijah Mitchell based on the production that he put on the field last year, and I think that he could be a good value. I'm confused by the ADP. That's my biggest thing, because this is the highest guy we got on the list. So it's halfway between a sleeper and a not sleeper. If that makes sense.
Here's why I think he is a sleeper is because the only concern about Elijah Mitchell is the 49ers and their decision making, and their drafting of running backs, and what they do at the running back position is sometimes scary because they could just take someone out. But really, as long as his job is secure, this is actually a very safe pick to get Elijah Mitchell there at pick 60. In terms of points per game last year, Mitchell was a top, I believe, 15 running back. So he was very, very solid, especially he wasn't super efficient in pass catching.
Yeah.
So in half PPR leagues, he was even better. But he was, I think, RB24 last year, RB25, RB26 in that range. Let me double check. Yeah. He was RB26 last year, but he only played in 12 games.
Mm.
So if he played a full season, I think he probably would have been around that RB14, 15 range where he kind of was in those points per game. And as long as the situation doesn't change, that's where he's probably going to finish this year. I don't think he's RB1 by any means, but he's a really solid RB2 that you're getting later than the other RB2s that are probably in his tier. I think Travis Etienne is probably in the same tier as him, has a higher ceiling, but maybe Mitchell has a higher floor. Mm-hmm. Breece Hall, same thing. Josh Jacobs, those guys are kind of all in the same tier as Mitchell.
Yeah.
Mitchell's at the back end of that tier, but because of that, you're getting him 15, 20 spots later than those guys. So I think he's really just about value and why people are sleeping on him, because there's some people in the fantasy community that treat Mitchell like a top 15 running back and will take him
as a top
exactly, in the 30s range, in the late 3rd, early 4th round. And I'm not saying that's right, but in the 6th round, that's pretty good value.
I will say too, the other, the thing that makes me a little bit hesitant on Elijah Mitchell is, I believe in his upside and the things that he can do, but the 49ers constantly draft running backs in the 4th, 5th round. And I remember last year they drafted Trey Sermon, in the 3rd, late 3rd?
Yeah, I believe it was, it might have been early 3rd.
But they draft guys every year, and then every year it seems like it's a different running back that we're coming out the following year going, oh my God, this guy, he is the guy for the 49ers. And then 2 weeks into the season, it's, Tyson Davis Price. That's like his name is. So I don't know, but I do like the upside that Elijah Mitchell has in that role. And I think people like me are more hesitant, which is pushing him a little bit further in drafts. Underdog ADP has him at 70, which is a little bit lower. And I think that's probably where he's going to end up being by the start of the NFL season.
Which is fine. I mean, at 70, at pick 70, I'm taking it.
100%. All right, let's talk about the next guy really quick because we got a total of 4 minutes.
Okay.
All right, so it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, another guy similar to Miles Sanders who had his opportunities and has not.
I was heavy on the Clyde trade.
Yeah, who did not turn out. Ronald Jones is there. They're going to probably not split, but there's going to be, kind of a split backfield there in terms of work. His ADP right now is pick 77. So that's low, but he does provide some decent upside. If he stays healthy for a full season, he gets 0.83 fantasy points per opportunity. In the Chiefs offense, if he gets similar to what I was saying with AJ Dillon, like 215 to 220 total touches, he could turn that into a 190 to 200 fantasy point season, which would then in turn put him in the conversation of being a very good flex for your team. I like this guy in the 8th round, 7th round in your drafts. And I think he's definitely a sleeper at this point because, last 2 years, he was a 1st and a 3rd round pick, and now he's all the way in the 7th, 8th round. And he's in the Chiefs offense, projected to be the number 1 running back. I would smash that all day.
Yeah, I definitely am way more down on Clyde than I ever really have been. Partly it's because of how they use him. It frustrates me a lot. They use him like they would use kind of like a Jonathan Taylor, who they probably should have drafted. He's not involved in the passing game as much as I expected him to be. He's coming out of college. He was a pass catching back. I was thinking this is a guy that's going to get 80 targets in an elite Chiefs passing offense. And he got 54 his rookie season and just 23 last year, on pace for 40 something targets. So to me, that's just too low. My hope though is with Tyreek Hill gone, it might open up some things for Clyde in the passing game. I would hope that it does. I think it will as well. I know someone on Roto World, I believe. Or no, it was on another guy from The Athletic, Nate Taylor, was writing an article about a month ago saying that he thinks that the Chiefs will use Clyde more involved in the passing game. So
the way we wanted.
Yes. So if that happens, that could mean big things for Clyde. He's also been hurt. He was also hurt last year. And like you said, as a 1st round pick, obviously he was a bust. Last year as a 3rd round pick, he was a bust. But now he's a 6th round pick. And 6th to 7th round, and that feels so much better. Yeah, I think you can feel comfortable with him at your flex on a week-to-week basis.
And Sanders to me are like interchangeable at this point too.
Yeah, which is so gross because those are 2 guys that I've completely given up on. And then based on what their teams did in the offseason, it's like, okay, maybe I'll give them one more chance.
Right.
Which, might be a bad idea, but they have good. Their values right now, because so many people are down on those players.
Yep.
It's almost like you have to do it because it's just good value. And those guys could end up being very solid, productive players. I'm not telling you either one is going to be great, but I could see Clyde being a good flex on a week-to-week basis and maybe even an RB2.
Agreed. Any more thoughts on these guys that we just referenced?
No, we can mention Cordell Patterson as an honorable mention, the grossest one.
Never.
Okay. I tried.
They drafted a running back. They brought in Damian Williams. Frick that.
Yeah,
don't draft Cordell Patterson.
Might be the worst offense in the league too, or one of them.
Definitely. We got a mock draft on Thursday or Friday, or whenever that show comes out. So be sure to check that out. See you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.